everybody, I'm Howard Tiersky. Welcome to the Winning Digital Customer Show. Today is going to be a very unusual show because I'm going to tell you a story that I found a lot of people have been interested in, and honestly, to my surprise. I've been doing a lot of podcasts lately to promote my book, Winning Digital Customers. You may have heard of it. And I have been often asked a little bit about my story and my history and my background and how I came to start my own agency and consulting company. And it's not something I have talked about very often just because I just always assumed people wouldn't be that interested. But I actually found a lot of people were asking about it, and I even got a lot of comments on it. So I thought I would share with you guys a little bit of my story, because what I did was I left a big kind of senior executive role at a large company already now almost 14 years ago and started my own business. And I've been running that business more or less since then with some twists and turns and changes. And a lot of people are interested in that story. And I specifically thought, and I would imagine there's probably a lot about that story that might not be interesting, but as I thought about the things that people have seemed to express an interest in, I get a lot of questions about this. Oh, you started your own business. How did you do that? Things like that. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about it because I've actually discovered that a lot of people who are senior executives at large companies themselves, which I think is a lot of the people who watch and listen to these shows, have this in their mind. Like, it's like this idea like, well, I'm working for a big company, but I wonder what it would be like to start my own business. Is it right for me, et cetera? So to structure my thinking in this, because normally, I'm coming on here and I'm talking about something about digital transformation, right? How to create a pitch case for digital transformation, or how to generate ideas, or how to reduce risk in building something. I'm giving you guidance on something that I've learned along the way, or I'm interviewing a guest with content about how to do the work of digital. And here I'm going to talk a little about my own story and what I learned from it. So as I say, a little bit of a different type of show today. Hopefully you find it interesting. So here, but just so you know what's coming, here's what I'm planning to talk about. I thought I'd structure this as a set of questions. And these are the questions that I get asked most about my own journey and experience. The first is, I was in a big, fairly cushy corporate job. Why did I leave that and start my own company? To some people, that sounds like maybe a crazy thing to do. Doesn't seem crazy to me, but I can understand why other people wouldn't see it the same way I did. So why did I do that? Second of all, was I afraid? Was I worried about leaving behind a big salary and all that and starting my own company? I'm going to talk about that. Number three, so how did I do it? Just literally, logistically, like how did I go from one day working for a big company and then the next day I was running my own or starting my own company? How did I make that happen? Did I have investors, or like what was that transition like? Was it hard? And what was the hardest part? For a lot of people, I think the idea of starting their own company feels just completely overwhelming. Like, how would I do everything? How would I set it up? And how would I deal with the accounting? Or how would I find people? And where would I get the money from? And all these types of things. So I'm obviously not going to go through every detail, but I want to answer that question of, was it hard? What was the hardest part? Number five, how did I know if I was really ready to do this? I might take these a little out of sequence now that I look at this list freshly, but how did I know that it was time, in other words, to leave a big company and start my own company? I'm going to talk about that. So how did it go? Like, was it good? 6 months after leaving, was I like, oh my God, I've made the biggest mistake in my life. How am I ever going to get back where I was? Did I have regrets, et cetera? So I'm going to talk about that. And number seven, is it right for me? Not me, meaning you. In that case, you're me. Does that make sense? And there should be a question mark there. Damn it. My first grade teacher would be very upset with me for ending a question without a proper punctuational question mark. But her name was Mrs. Markowitz, by the way. She was terrible. Anyway, so I will be answering the question, how do you know whether this type of move is right for you? It may or may not be. I'm certainly not here to tell you that it is right for you. And lastly, what do I think is the most important thing for success if you're doing what I did, and generally speaking, leaving a big corporate job and starting your own business? So that is what I'm going to talk about. I have no more slides. I'm only going to just essentially go through and answer these questions for you. So first of all, why did I leave a big corporate job and start my own business? Well, first, let me just tell you what the job was, just to give you a little context. I right out of graduate school, and by the way, I have a graduate degree in theater directing. So just so you know where I came from, and I was doing theater productions I was living in Los Angeles at the time. And in parallel with that, actually, while I was in graduate school, I got a job working for a big consulting company called Ernst & Young. And what was my job? I was in the graphics department. That was my initial job at Ernst & Young, because in addition to being, I was obviously an artistic sort of person. In addition to being in the theater, I did a lot of design, graphic design, early Macintosh, Photoshop, desktop publishing. This was back in the early 90s. So you can imagine things were much more primitive back then. But anyway, this was a skill I had that I knew that I could make money doing. Theater is a much harder thing to make money doing. So this was kind of, if you will, my day job. And I was working for Ernst & Young in the graphics department. And that was how I started. And then I was with Ernst & Young Consulting for about 16 or 17 years, something like that. I think it's 16. And during that time, not an important thing to know, but the consulting practice was bought by another company called Capgemini, which is another one of the world's sort of largest consulting companies. So at one point in time, my paycheck went from going from Ernst & Young Consulting to Capgemini, but that wasn't so much because I moved, but they moved the whole huge division of the company that I was a part of. So, when I left Capgemini, I was a senior executive there in charge of e-commerce practice and some other things. And basically flying all over the world, working with huge Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 clients, consulting on digital transformation, digital things in general, building websites, creating e-commerce businesses. That was essentially what I was doing. And that's, so that's the history. That doesn't actually answer why did I do that. That's just to give you context of what was it that I did. And then what I did was I started my own consulting company and digital agency doing kind of the same type of work as I was doing before. But I went from a company which at the time I think had something like 40 or 50,000 employees. And actually now I think they have like 150,000 employees or something like that. Capgemini, enormous global company. At the time, 40 seemed like a lot. And of course, I went to a company that initially was just me and then grew over time. And now we have about 100. So even still to this day, we're certainly not of Capgemini scale. So why would I do that? Why would I leave a big six-figure paycheck at a large global company that was flying me all over the world and move to a company where I was the only person and I had to start everything from scratch? Well, I did it for a few reasons. The first thing was I wanted more control. I was always being told, hey, we need you here, we need you here, we need you there, we need you in this country, we need you out on the West Coast, we need you at this pharmaceutical client. And on the one hand, it feels great to be needed and wanted and for people to, feel that they want to pull you in to what they're doing. And at the same time, some of those things were not what I wanted to do. There were certain industries that I was less enthusiastic about than others. There were, and in addition, I had small children at home at the time. Some of you know I have 5 children. At the time, I had 2, and my daughter, who's in college now, was probably 4 or something like that, or 3 or 4, and my second daughter, who's now a senior in high school, was 3 or whatever it was, 4 and 3 or 3 and 2 or something along those lines. So I was traveling all over the place, and I didn't have an opportunity to spend as much time at home as I wanted to, and I was senior enough to be able to say no, I'm not going to fly to Hong Kong for that meeting. No, I'm not going to go to London. No, I'm not going to spend a week in LA. But it wasn't really consistent with the company. That's just not the nature of the company, the business. How could I not do that if that's what all the sort of team members needed to do? So it was difficult for me not to travel. So these were some of the reasons. And, I just thought it would be fun. I just thought it would be fun. And I'm going to address this question, which is actually number one of these. How did I know if I was ready? I didn't know for sure that I was ready, but I felt I was pretty ready. And part of the reason was because I went from acting as essentially a consultant, providing services to large companies, into a business where I was doing very much the same thing, but albeit at a drastically smaller scale. But what that meant was I had gotten to the point where, I had long since graduated from the graphics department, and my job was really to go out and find clients that would buy these services from my company, to hire the people to do the work, to organize the projects, the methodologies, make sure that they were delivered successfully. Heck, I was even in charge of making sure the agreements got done, the contracts. I mean, of course, there were lawyers, but, and even making sure the bills got paid. If the client, was late on their bill, it eventually would wind up on my desk, and I have to call the client and say, hey, listen, we're 90 days behind. You owe us money. So I got to the point in that role where I really felt like, gosh, I'm kind of doing every step of this process. And so therefore I felt pretty confident that I knew there was no part of the business that was a mystery to me. And also I just felt that kind of itch. I felt that desire to do something differently. I really appreciate and loved the work that I was doing. I really did. I have zero bad things to say about it. Wasn't one of these take this job and shove it type situations. But I was ready to move on. I just felt like the novelty had worn off. If someone gave me a call and said that I needed to be in Istanbul next week, it wasn't like, oh, cool, Istanbul, I've never been there. I was like, oh, geez, And that was what told me. And I know for someone who hasn't had those kind of opportunities, it may sound completely unappreciative. But no matter what you're doing, there comes a point where whatever perks you're getting or whatever opportunities you're getting maybe aren't as meaningful to you as they used to be. And other things may instead be meaningful. And actually, I'm going to mention one other reason I left, which is I had grown in the organization to a scale of responsibility where I had limited opportunity to be deeply involved in client projects, meaning we had so many people working. I was being pulled in so many directions. I was a little bit more of I don't want to say a figurehead, but like I would fly over and I would meet with a client about a project, but I wouldn't have time to continue to really keep up with that team on that project because the next day I was flying somewhere else. The next day I was going somewhere else. And so I had limited opportunity in some cases to really be actively a part of something. I was more just dropping in on a huge portfolio of things. And then also was not as fun for me as when I had the opportunity to really sink my teeth in and get involved in helping with the actual transformation. So those are some of the reasons that I left. But you might think, well, those are reasons to leave, but gosh, you must have had a lot of reasons not to leave. And that kind of goes to number 2. Wasn't I afraid? And I think this is actually one of the things that I get asked the most. And I think it's because there's a lot of people who are in senior executive roles and they're thinking they might like to do something like this, but they're concerned. And naturally, they might be concerned about money and, the disruption of their paycheck. They might be concerned about failure. They feel like they know how to succeed in the big company environment and they're not sure if they're going to be successful. I was not afraid, or maybe let me put it another way. I had contemplated doing this for a couple of years, looked for an opportunity, and I think I did it at a point in time when I was not afraid. And I was not afraid for a couple of reasons, mainly 2 reasons. The first reason I wasn't afraid is that I was pretty confident that if for some reason it didn't go well, if I went out and started my own company and then, it just totally was a disaster, I could go back to the kind of work I was already doing. I was pretty confident that the company I was working for would take me back in the same role. But if for some reason they couldn't, or they wouldn't, or they said we don't have an opening, that there were a whole bunch of other large competitors. I'm pretty sure I could go to IBM or Accenture or Deloitte or any of these companies. I never tested this, maybe not, but I felt confident that if I could show them the work I'd done at a place like Capgemini and Ernst & Young and said, okay, I left to try to start my own business, didn't work out, but I'm back looking for a big company job, I felt pretty confident I could get hired pretty quickly. So I wasn't really worried that it was some sort of, I was closing the door and I would never be able to go back. So that was one thing. And I would encourage you to have that mindset, really ask yourself, am I really giving up something that I can't get back again? Or might it take a few months of interviewing and stuff? It's a little bit of a hassle, but could I really basically get right back where I am? That massively reduces the risk. Now, by the way, I don't know if that is true for you, so I don't want to tell you that it's true, but at least ask yourself that question, because sometimes I think we magnify the risk in our minds by leaving a job without realizing that, there's other jobs that are very similar if you wanted to go back to that sort of big company life. The other reason that I wasn't afraid was that I kind of lucked into an opportunity to leave. And that a little bit goes to number 3, how did I make the move? I'm going to give you the short version of this story, but essentially, bear in mind that I had spent a couple of years with this goal in mind of finding the right opportunity to leave to start my own company. It wasn't something I was pursuing every day, but, and obviously it wasn't something I was telling my existing employer. But if I'd had a frank conversation with you at that point in time and you'd have said, hey, where do you see yourself in a few years? I would have told you, I want to start my own company at the right point in time. And then something happened that actually was lucky. But I also want to preface it by saying, what it really was an opportunity that landed in my lap. And what I really believe is that we all have opportunities that are being presented to us all the time, maybe not every day, but regularly. And part of it's being attuned to those opportunities. And my particular opportunity kind of went like this. I was doing a project for my company at a large media and entertainment client. And we had completed a project, which was a strategy for essentially a digital transformation. Back then, this was in 2007, I think. We might not have used that term, but essentially that's what it was. So I created this vision with them, had worked with top executives, CEO, others. And the next phase of the work that we were getting ready to sell to this client was to implement it. And this was going to be a big project for my company, and everyone was very excited about it. And this client of my company, of the company that I worked with, they were doing multiple other projects as well, other types of work that I wasn't involved in, that wasn't about digital, it was about other things. Because a big company like Capgemini, they do a lot of things. And so all of a sudden then, and this is where the opportunity kind of landed in my lap, the legal department of the company I was working for at the time realized that they had made a mistake. And the mistake was that the type of work that I was in the middle of doing for this client was prohibited by a non-compete agreement that they had with another client, meaning they were working, the company, not me, but the company was working with another client that was in the same business. And they had an agreement with that client that they would not do digital projects of this nature for their direct competitors. And this was one of their direct competitors. It didn't preclude them from doing other work, helping with human resources, outsourcing or whatever it may be. But this type of work, because they were doing similar work with this other client, was prohibited. But for whatever, can you just imagine, at a huge company, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of contracts. And this point had been overlooked. Legal had essentially made a mistake. So I should never have even done the first project that I did, but I did. But then they said, well, you have to stop, right? You have to go in and you have to tell this client, I'm sorry, we made a mistake. We cannot do the next phase of work for you. We're going to help you find another company. We want to, be appreciative of the opportunity, but just essentially just have to tell them, no, we're not going to be able to do this next phase. My legal department won't allow me to. And so naturally, that was a huge disappointment for me, as you can imagine. We were getting ready to sell this next phase of work. So I went in and had that conversation with the company, and it went very, very badly. They were very upset and unhappy and angry, and they were really counting on us to do that next phase of work. And so they threatened to fire the company from other work not related to what I was doing, because they were so unhappy that this mistake had been made and they'd put them in this position. And so the potential consequence for the company I was working for was quite large, because it wasn't just this one project they would lose. They'd already accepted they weren't going to get this next project because they couldn't legally, but they were going to potentially lose these other things that they had already sold, or they were in the process of selling, and that weren't covered by this legal issue. Hopefully this isn't too detailed, but I just want to give you the general flavor of that. So, this is the moment where I think I realized there was an opportunity. And I'm pointing it out this way just to show you that it wasn't a crazy obvious opportunity. It wasn't like someone said, here, would you like to start your own business? But all of a sudden it occurred to me, since I'd been looking for an opportunity to start my own business all this time, that maybe there was a solution. And so the short version is, I spoke to my company first and to the client and had a series of conversations, but I basically said, hey, listen, maybe I can solve this problem. What if I started my own company and did this project for the client so that it wouldn't be an issue with the non-compete, because it wouldn't be Capgemini doing this project, it would be me personally. And but the company would potentially be comfortable with that because they've already been working with me. Normally, see, I'd be prohibited from doing that because when you work for a big company, you generally have a prohibition in your own contract that says you can't go steal a client. You can't just go say, I'm going to start a new company and do work for this client. But in this case, it was actually a benefit to my employer, who then became my former employer, because otherwise they were angering this big client. So bottom line is, everyone said yes. The company was comfortable with me starting my own company and doing this project because they already knew me and they knew what I could do. The company I was working for was comfortable with giving me the right to do it and essentially waiving my non-compete. And so I started with a client. And that was one of the other reasons that I wasn't afraid. Now, it wasn't necessarily a guarantee of a huge amount of work, because anytime you start working on projects, you have to continue to prove yourself. And I know that this company was not 100% certain that this brand new company that I was starting would be able to do it, but they were willing to give me a shot. And that actually also gave me additional reason not to be afraid and helped me make the move, because I knew at least I was starting with one client. So that was a little bit of the story of how I made that move. And now a lot of people ask, was it hard? And by the way, if you have other questions, feel free to pop those up. I realize I can only give you so much detail here, or maybe you're all gone already. Like I say, I've rarely told these stories because I kind of figure, I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here to talk about stuff that you can find useful. But there seems to be a lot of interest in this topic, so I thought I'd give it a whirl. So we'll see. But if you're interested in some aspect of this that I'm not going into, feel free to put a question in the comment stream, and I'll try to answer it later. So was it hard, and what was the hardest part? One of the things that I find a lot of people who have not started their own business believe that starting your own business must be very hard because there are a lot of aspects that you might not know about, like accounting or just even forming a corporation and what are the legal issues. And while I'm not going to get into those things, I just would say this: it's really not hard, right? Starting your own company is not hard. One thing that's great about being in the United States, which is where I am, and probably many of you are, is that you don't need anyone's permission to start your own company. If you're in some countries, you have to go apply and say, I'd like to open a barbershop, and you have to get a license or something. Here, no. All you have to do is fill out a form online and pay them, $50 or whatever else, and you've incorporated the company. Now, of course, just incorporating a company isn't a thriving business. Yes, there are certain things you're going to need to make sure you follow, human resources, rules and laws and other things. But to go get yourself like a payroll company, like ADP to run your payroll, to calculate people's taxes, to go get a lawyer to incorporate you, to go get an accountant to handle your books, and a bookkeeper to put stuff in QuickBooks. This is really no big deal. It might take you a week of calling around and talking to some people, but this should not be a giant psychological barrier. If you know the core of the thing you want to start the business doing, don't let the ancillary things be a major burden. And, I think this also goes to what I would say is one of the keys to success is bring in other people. One of the things that I did early on, and actually it was advice that I got from Tony Robbins that I think was some of the most helpful advice I got when I was starting my company, which is think about what your own time is worth. And even when you don't have money coming in, you might feel like, well, I don't have any money yet. I can't start hiring a whole bunch of people. And that's true. You do have to watch cash carefully. You don't want to take the mindset like you had maybe at a big company where they just spend money wildly. Not all companies spend money wildly, don't get me wrong, but at a large company, there's a lot less concern about if we hire one person and we don't have enough business, it could bankrupt us. You don't have that. You have a lot more scale to make those kinds of mistakes. It can feel when you're a small company, oh man, if I hire someone for, $800 a week, I don't have any money coming in and now I've got $800 a week going out. That's crazy. But on the other hand, what's your time worth? And I knew my time was worth a lot more than say $20 an hour. And so I didn't worry too much about hiring somebody that I could give a lot of this work to and say, okay, you've got to go find 3 accountants and let's get some quotes. And you've got to figure this out and do that. You want to find someone, smart, someone who you can rely on to check and learn about things. But if there are things you don't know about either, you'd have to go up the same learning curve as that person would, right? To go find a payroll provider or whatever. So find somebody, or ultimately you're going to need many people, but as quickly as you can, get someone who can help and support you. Because one of the challenges in starting your business is your time is pulled in many directions because you have to do what? You have to find clients. You have to get the business set up. You have to, once you have some clients, you've got to get the work done, but you've also got to be thinking about legal issues and finding employees. And, there's potentially a lot of things to think about. But the key is not to try to do it all yourself, but to as quickly as possible, get some arms and legs that can help you get these things done. Now, that does require, obviously, a little bit of money. Some people said, well, where did you get the money to start your own business? There are different types of businesses, and they have different capital requirements. If I was trying to create the next social media platform, I might have to hire 50 software developers to work for a year before we were ready to launch something. And then I might need to go find somebody who would finance that because I'd need millions and millions of dollars to pay their salaries until such time as money starts coming back in. I don't know about launching those kinds of businesses because that's not the kind of business I launched. One of the beautiful things about running a services business like mine, whether it's a design agency, an architecture firm, a law firm, an accounting firm, but if you're in a business where you're essentially selling services and people's time, basically, you don't need a lot of startup. If someone wants my help, they can pay me. I don't need to go hire a bunch of people. And then if they're paying me and I need to hire a couple of people to help me deliver that project, I might have to pay those people in January and the client may not pay the bill for that project until February or March. But I've got a reasonably rapid flow of money coming in. It's not like I have to work for a year or two and pay hundreds of people before anyone will start paying. It's not like I need to build a factory. I need to spend $10 million building a factory or spend millions of dollars developing a drug. So again, some businesses are like that, but my business is not like that. And so I did need a little bit of upfront money. It wasn't a lot though. I think I borrowed 20 grand or something like that from a home equity line of credit, that kind of thing. But really, it wasn't, and I was fortunate, and then I had a client to start with. But again, was I fortunate or was I just knowledgeable about what I wanted to do? And then when the right window opened, I was able to figure out how to turn it around. And I'm not trying to give myself too much credit. Definitely the universe helped me out in this situation. But I want to suggest to you that once you figure out what you need to do, and you're looking for opportunities will probably start to come your way, whether it's a conversation you have with somebody at a family event, or someone tells you about a potential customer, or whether, I mean, again, I don't know what your business will be, but there's lots of opportunities that pop up. And I've seen that happen to me over and over the years. Okay. I want to try to race to the finish line here. I know I've been talking for a while. How did I know if I was, okay, so I talked about this. Okay, so I think I'm at number 6, and number 6 is a quick one. How did it go? Do I regret it? Never regretted it. Never regretted it for even one day. I enjoyed it. I had enough financial success quickly enough that I never had a moment where I felt like, oh my God, this is going to cause me to have a huge financial hit to my family. And then within a few years, I was making a lot more money than I made, even though no complaints about what I was making before. But if you're running your own business and you're running it effectively, the opportunity to earn more money is usually present. Again, depending on the business, depending on the success. And while of course there was a lot to be done and there were moments of stress, no doubt, I got to tell you, there was a lot to be done and there were moments of stress in my old job. You know, I had a lot of responsibility. And one of the things that created particular stress is things that were beyond my control. You know, someone up on high, I mean, I was a senior executive, but I wasn't in charge of the company. And there were, I don't know how many levels above me. So they might decide we're going to do layoffs, or they might decide we're going to shift our focus, or they might tell me we need you to do this or that, or they might say, hey, your sales goal for next year has been doubled. And like, these things were often difficult and for me to have any influence on. So it was great to be able to be kind of the master of my own fate. So no regrets. And we have had problems along the way. Of course, every business has problems. I think it's Keith Cunningham, I can't remember, but someone said you know who said this? It's Donald Trump. Always a little hesitant to quote Donald Trump these days, but I'm pretty sure it's Donald Trump who said, maybe it was in The Art of the Deal, business is problems. If you don't have problems, you probably don't have a business. And I think you need to anticipate that. But again, I'm going to suggest to you that you're probably not without problems and difficulties in politics and other things if you're in a senior executive role in a big company as well. Is it right for me, meaning you? Well, I don't know. I would just say two things. Number one, I think there's a lot of people who have a desire. By the way, there's a lot of people who don't. If you're happy, you're loving your career, you're happy with how you're compensated, you feel enthusiastic, excited about your job for a big company, then the Lord knows there is zero reason that you need to start your own company. I'm not here to tell you that there's something wrong with being a senior executive at a big company and you need to switch to running your own business. Absolutely not. On the other hand, if you're somebody who feels like, God, that's what I'd really like to be doing, but I'm worried about money, but I'm concerned I wouldn't have the knowledge necessary to start a company, but I don't know where my clients would come from, but, and it's holding you back from doing what you really feel you want to do, well, then I would say, while I'm not suggesting you should quit your job tomorrow and then figure it all out, I'm going to say to you, start figuring it out now so that then maybe you'll feel ready to make the move. But then, I wouldn't not pursue it. I wouldn't, if you don't mind a double negative, I wouldn't hold yourself back from considering it and pursuing it because of all those fears and concerns. What I would instead do is say, this is what I really want. Get really clear on what you want. One of the exercises I did that helped me get clear on the fact that I wanted to start my own business was an exercise. I was probably from Tony Robbins, or it might have even been somewhere else, which was about creating a vision for your future and what you really wanted. And when I did that, I realized that this is what I really wanted. But that doesn't mean it's easy to get there. It's one thing to go, oh, I'd like to win $1 million. I'd like to own a yacht. I'd like to, own a zoo or whatever, If you say, what I really want is to own a zoo, that's my passion. I want to run and own a zoo. Well, how do you do that? I don't know. But if that's what you want, I would say, don't deny it. Start by saying, you know what? That's what I really want in life. That's what would make me happy. And then start figuring out, how do people come to own zoos? Who already owns a zoo? How can I learn from them? What are the steps? What do I need to know? Obviously, that's quite different from my business, although it sometimes feels like a zoo around here. But in any case, so that's what I would say. The other thing I would say about is it right for me is I went from a big company doing consulting work and digital creative work and technical work for big companies. I mean, I was at a big company, but I was working for big companies. That's who my clients were, companies like General Electric and General Motors and Office Depot and such. And I went and started my own company doing almost exactly the same thing. So as I mentioned earlier, I knew how to do it. It wasn't like I decided to open a restaurant, for example, which I don't know how to do. And so is it right for you, or a combination of is it right for you and is it the right time? You have to ask yourself, do I have the core skills to do this? Now, again, to be clear, I'm not saying if you are an expert at running restaurants and you've worked for multiple people who own and run restaurants, and you've run the restaurants for them and you understand every aspect of the restaurant business, but you don't understand everything about business, meaning legal issues and accounting issues and those types of banking issues, but you know the restaurant business, then I wouldn't worry about it, because as I said earlier, you can get other people to do those other things, generally speaking. But if you don't know how to run the restaurant, if you are like me, a consultant, and you're like, my passion is running a restaurant business, then it might not be right for you, or it might not be the right time for you. And what I would suggest is you need to make sure you really understand the business you want to start before you start it. That I had that, but if you are wanting to make a move, and for example, let's say you wanted to start a business like mine. You want to start a company that does digital consulting, and it was a agency and a consultancy. But the role that you've had is not like my role. You didn't work for an Accenture or Deloitte running their practice helping clients. You worked for General Electric, as you're the chief digital officer of General Electric, or you worked for a big company in the company in the digital role. Well, now you're switching to a role where you're selling services to clients. That's quite a different business. And even though you know digital, you may not yet have enough knowledge about how to run an agency, how to run a consultancy. And you need to either gain that knowledge or you need a partner. I'm blessed by an incredible team of people who work with me, and many of whom have been with me for more than 10 years. And they are a family, and they are all, in a sense, my partners in this business that we're building together. And I try to make sure that they're rewarded well. But from a pure legal perspective, no, they're not partners. I don't have partners. And but many businesses, in fact, most, if you look at some of the most successful companies like a Google, Yahoo, Facebook, there are partnerships at the top that are running those companies. And so you may need somebody else to fill in the gaps that you don't have. You may need somebody who has that experience that you don't have. So some combination of having it yourself. I don't think I would leave a job in industry A to go to industry B and start a new company. I would rather say leave your job in industry A to go to another big company in industry B, learn that business, maybe not for 15, 16 years like I did, but at least for a year or two. And then you're more ready to start your own business. And so then I just want to end with, so what's most successful? What's most important, I mean to say. So what is most important for success in running your own business? And on the one hand, of course, you could argue, well, it's highly dependent on the nature of the business, et cetera. But I think in the end, most businesses, the part that's most important is people. And you want to make sure that you, first of all, from a perspective of whoever you're serving, your customer, your client, you're really understanding their needs, and you're really focusing on making sure that you're creating value for them. You want to create a business, whatever it is, that is differentiated, that provides an amazing value, whether you're selling, $1 hot dogs, or whether you're selling $10 million consulting engagements or medical devices, or whether you're selling $150 million satellites, whatever it is. You want to make sure that when someone looks at what you're doing, they're like, wow, I really want to do business with that person, with that company. I'm just going to get so much back for my investment in that relationship, whether that's the dollars, the time, whatever it is. And ideally, you want your team members to feel the same way as well, because you're not going to be able to do it alone, most likely. If you're doing it alone, you're not really building a business. You're just essentially a freelancer. You're a contractor. And by the way, some actors do that, right? Tom Cruise or somebody like that can be out there and they pay him $10 million a movie. And, but most people who start their own business, if they really want to reach a high level of success, they're not creating a one-person law practice, just themselves as an accountant. They're building a team. They're building a company. And when you're doing that, of course, you're dealing with people, whether they're your employees or your contractors or other companies that you partner with, like your law firm, isn't even the main point. The point is that those people, first of all, they're the people you're going to deal with day in and day out. And so they're going to affect the quality of your life. So value those relationships, and likewise the clients, of course. And really, I would say that's, I think, the most important thing for success. Because if you've got great relationships with your team members, and you've got great relationships with your clients and your prospects and the people that might eventually become your clients, you're going to be in a good position to run a great business. And in contrary, if your clients are kind of not loving you, they're resentful, your employees aren't happy, it's going to be really, really tough to run a successful business. So if I had to pick one thing that's most important, I would say start focusing on people. So hopefully this is helpful. This is a quick summary of my story. Of course, I've left out an enormous amount, but perhaps given you even more than you wanted anyway. I have no idea. Certainly, as I said, feel free to ask any questions. I hope this story was useful to you. And I figure if it wasn't, you stopped listening long ago. So that's fine too. We will be resuming in our next show with more normal content of a more how to do this, how to do that nature. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks as always for watching and for listening, the Winning Digital Customers Show. Have a great day.